Hi, I'm Alex. I am presenting on a collection of records concerning the Buddhist Canon, catalogue of South Asian texts by Seng. Here's what I'm going to cover. I'll give an introduction to the text and then a little background by the author, Seng, and then talk about the style and structure of the text. And fourthly, some background on the Chinese bibliographical tradition that helped shape that style. Finally, a conclusion and leave some time for questions. So a bit of an introduction on the text. It's Chinese text. The Chinese title is 出三藏集集, which means collection of records concerning the Chinese Buddhist canon. It's the oldest extant catalogue of the Chinese Buddhist canon, or of a version of the Chinese Buddhist canon. Dates to about 515. It's a catalogue primarily of South Asian texts in Chinese translation and the commentaries. Now, the commentaries are both the Indian commentaries and also Chinese commentaries on the text, and sometimes commentaries on the commentaries or summarizations as well. So Seng, he lived from 445 to 518 in the Liang dynasty. The text is 15 fascicles or scrolls long, and it can be found in the Taisho Canon, volume 55, number 2145, and also in other versions of the canon. It's considered a foundational work in Buddhist bibliographical studies. It's a little bit on the author, Seng. Seng, he was a monk born in present-day Jiangsu province. He lived in the Liu Song and Liang dynasties. He became a monastic in his teens. He's known for being a very scholarly monk, and one of the first ones specializing in bibliographic studies. He is kind of representative of this monk scholar tradition in Chinese Buddhism, with a very strong background in Chinese literature and history, and very aware of their own the Chinese native traditions, and helped shape the view and style in approaching Buddhism there. This is at a time in the northern and southern dynasties of China, where China was not unified and Buddhism was really flourishing in China. And the emperor of the time, Emperor Wu Di of Liang, he was a devout Buddhist, and a very strong supporter of Buddhism too. So the style and structure, the name 出三藏集集 literally means collection of records on translations. So there, that word 出, which just means kind of going out, it actually means here translating from Sanskrit to Chinese. There were some earlier catalogues, notably by Daoan. Unfortunately, they haven't been preserved. So this is the earliest one we have. So it's very important in understanding the formation of the Chinese Buddhist canon. There's actually no English translation. However, there's some translations of several passages that have been published. And this is the structure. Basically, fascicle 1 is an introduction. Fascicles 2 through 5 are the bibliographic records. And then there's a collection of prefaces in fascicles 6 through 11, and then the remainder are biographies. So why did he create this text? What motivated him? It's hard to know. We can't really go back and read his mind, but it's notable that the Emperor Wu Di had imperial orders for creation of 2 catalogues. However, Seng was not one of them. It's the only one that survived, but it wasn't one of those. And so it kind of shows that the monastic order wasn't 100% aligned with the emperor on Buddhism. And Seng states that the background on the origin and transmission of the text is very important for the understanding of the meaning of the text. So the Chinese, being they're not native texts, people are curious of the origin of these texts, more details, wanting to know more details of them. And also when they were translated, the records weren't always kept. So he was interested in preserving those records. In his introduction, he quotes a long story from the Treatise of Perfection of Great Wisdom that tells of the great peril of the fate of the Dharma and potential for being lost after the Buddha's nirvana, and also many arhats passing to nirvana, and there's nobody left to remember the teachings. So it manifests a very strong Mahayana position on the need, with also the need to record these texts before these arhats are kind of not accessible to us anymore, passing to nirvana. Something on the, so a little bit of background here on the Chinese bibliographic tradition, which the text is modeled on, actually. So in the former Han Dynasty, 202 BCE to about 9 CE, Confucianism was established as the official orthodox thought. Confucius himself, though, he lived in the Warring States period from about 551 to 479 BCE. And the interesting thing is, in the Qin dynasty, the first unified dynasty of China, they subscribed to a different school, which was the legalist school, and they burned all of the books related to Confucianism and anything that didn't subscribe to the legalist tradition. So when the Han Dynasty overthrew the Qin, a number of scholars looked to establish a new philosophy there for the new dynasty. And Liu Xiang was one of the most notable scholars, and he created the first Chinese catalog called Abstracts, or Bielu, which is a catalog of the Imperial Library. And he was very instrumental in cementing the 5 classics and Confucianism as the official state orthodox thought. So really, the Confucian tradition was actually lost. It wasn't continuous since the time of Confucius. It was actually lost and reinvented by scholars at the time, and notably Liu Xiang. So what does this have to do with the Seng text? It's kind of a parallel between wanting to trace the Mahayanas back to the origin of the Buddha, the Mahayana text, back to the time of the Buddha, and the parallels with the Chinese wanting to trace the Confucian thought back to Confucius himself, when actually most of the texts that are mostly being burnt, but there was still some surviving. So it's kind of a parallel there. This is my conclusion. The collection of records concerning the Chinese Buddhist canon by Seng is very important for our understanding of the formation of the Chinese Buddhist canon. Its compilation was motivated by the desire to contextualize the origins of Buddhism and its transmission to China. And the style of the text is strongly influenced by the Chinese tradition of bibliography, and there's this parallel between the cataloging of the Mahayana text with the cataloging and reinvention of Confucianism. And the text, I think, is a milestone in the sinification of Buddhism in China. So that is all. So questions, anybody?